picture the scenario. You're standing outside a venue, right? It's late, it's pouring rain. You just walked out of this amazing concert with like thousands of other people, and you are just ready to go home.
Oh, yeah. We've all been there. It's the worst.
Right. So you pull out your phone, you open your favorite ride sharing app, type in your address, and boom, there it is. That massive, glowing surge multiplier.
And your heart just drops.
Totally. A ride that normally costs, I don't know, $15 is suddenly $85. And as
Yeah.
you're staring at that number, just watching your bank account mentally drain, you really have to wonder, like, who or what is actually pulling the strings here?
Yeah. Is it a person? Is it an algorithm?
Exactly. Is there just some incredibly greedy algorithm sitting on a server somewhere in Silicon Valley? Or, I mean, is it a random dial being cranked up by a guy in a control room who sees it's raining on a weather map?
That feeling of being totally at the mercy of this opaque, seemingly unfair system is, well, it's something practically everyone listening has experienced. When we're standing in the rain and our wallets are on the line, we crave transparency, you know?
Yeah.
We want to know why that number is what it is.
Which is why today we are going to pull back the curtain on that exact moment. For this deep dive, we've got our hands on a really fascinating stack of sources.
Really fascinating. And dense?
Very dense. Specifically, we are looking at internal notes detailing a classic operations research case study. We are looking at the literal mathematical blueprints for citywide dispatching.
Which sounds dry, but it's really not.
It's not at all. The mission today is to demystify how this seemingly academic concept, it's called linear programming duality, is actually the secret engine running the entire gig economy. It's like the invisible hand deciding exactly who picks you up and exactly how much you're going to pay for the privilege.
And we should probably emphasize right out of the gate that these sources aren't just presenting textbook hypotheticals. Like, this
Yeah.
isn't just theory.
Right, this is the real deal.
Exactly. The mathematical frameworks we are looking at today are the explicit mechanisms used by platforms like Uber, Lyft, Airbnb, essentially any massive gig economy marketplace.
Wow.
In fact, in the internal notes from Uber's marketplace team, they state point blank that they run these complex dispatch algorithms and then immediately, quote, read off the dual variables to use as their real-time pricing signals. The math literally dictates the marketplace.
Okay, let's unpack this because to understand that infuriating surge multiplier, we first have to understand the basic game being played on the city streets every single second.
Foundation.
Right. In the source material, they refer to this foundational setup as the primal LP, the primal linear program. So imagine your entire city as a giant real-time chessboard.
Okay, chessboard.
Yeah, you have N number of drivers and M number of riders. Every driver is sitting at a specific GPS coordinate, and every rider is standing on a curb somewhere else waiting to be picked up.
And the primary objective of this giant chessboard-like, the sole goal of this primal problem is to minimize the total dispatch cost across the entire city.
Which means what exactly?
Well, in the industry, they label this physical cost C. But practically speaking, this is overwhelmingly about minimizing what they call deadhead distance.
Dead-end distance.
Yeah, that is the empty miles a driver has to travel just to get to you. Platforms desperately want to keep those empty miles as low as physically possible because, I mean, nobody makes money driving an empty car.
Right. That makes total sense. It just burns gas.
It burns gas, it clogs up traffic, and it completely wastes time.
Okay, so logically, you want the closest car to pick up the closest person. But a game has to have rules, right? And the sources lay out two very specific mathematical rules or constraints for this primal problem.
Yes, and those constraints are really the bedrock of the entire operation. Constraint number 1 states that every single rider must be matched to a driver.
No matter what.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an absolute requirement. Mathematicians call this an equality constraint. The platform's baseline goal is that no paying customer is ever left stranded on the curb.
Okay, and the second rule?
Constraint number 2 applies to the supply side, the drivers. It states that drivers can remain idle. This is an inequality constraint. It simply means it is perfectly acceptable if some drivers aren't moving, just so long as all the riders are picked up.
I was reading through this section and trying to visualize this massive algebraic formula, and it honestly reminded me of arranging the seating chart at a gigantic, incredibly complex wedding reception.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right, because you have your guests. Those are the riders. And you have your chairs. Those are the drivers. You want to seat your guests as close to the buffet as possible to minimize how far they have to walk.
And that walking distance is your deadhead distance.
Exactly. Now, every single guest absolutely must have a seat. That's your equality constraint. But, like, if you rented way too many chairs from the vendor, it's totally fine if few of those chairs just sit empty in the corner.
Which is the driver inequality constraint.
Yeah, minimizing the walking distance to the buffet while guaranteeing every single guest gets a seat is a remarkably accurate way to visualize a citywide assignment problem.
It really helped it click for me.
The platform is basically just playing this seating game thousands of times a second across an entire metropolitan area.
I love the wedding analogy, but I have to admit, here's where I found myself getting completely stuck in the source material.
Where did you lose the thread?
Well, drawing lines on a map between drivers and riders to minimize driving distance makes intuitive sense. It's a physical efficiency problem. But my app doesn't show me miles. It shows me dollars.
Right, the actual cost to you.
Yeah. How does this simple matching game, this giant wedding seating chart, lead to complicated pricing and surge multipliers we see on our screens? There's like zero money involved in this primal problem. It's just physical distance.
That is the crucial question. And the jump from physical distance to actual dollars requires us to look at the mathematical shadow of the dispatch problem.
Yeah. In the world of optimization, every single primal problem like minimizing empty driving miles casts a mechanical, mathematical shadow. That shadow is called the dual LP.
So the math itself just generates this parallel
It
universe.
creates a perfect mirror image of the first problem. When you construct this dual LP, two completely new variables emerge organically from the math. Every constraint we just talked about of the primal problem spawns a corresponding shadow variable in the dual.
Okay, so remember the two rules.
Right. The rider constraint, the absolute rule that every rider must be picked up, spawns a variable that the sources call EJ.
EJ, got it.
And because it comes from an absolute equality constraint, the math dictates that YJ is what's known as a free variable. It can theoretically be any number, positive or negative.
I saw IJ in the notes, and I honestly start getting lost in all the Greek letters. Let's give this a nickname so we don't drown in algebra. The notes describe this variable as representing the minimal marginal cost to serve that specific rider. So if I'm interpreting that right, YJ is essentially the baseline fare. It's what the rider should pay just to cover the cost of getting the cart to them.
That's spot on.
Okay, let's call YJ the rider's fare.
The rider's fare works perfectly. Now let's look at the second rule. The driver constraint, the rule that drivers are allowed to sit,
idle,
spawns a second shadow variable called E.
Okay.
And because this one comes from an inequality constraint, the math dictates that E must always be greater than or equal to 0. It can never be negative.
Right.
The sources define this variable as the driver's capacity slack value, or their economic rent.
Okay, capacity slack value sounds like something straight out of a dense economics textbook. Let's unpack that one too. What does that actually mean for the guy sitting behind the wheel of a Honda Civic?
Right. In plain English, it is a precise mathematical measurement of how rare and how valuable that specific driver is at that exact moment in time, given their specific location compared to all the unassigned riders around them.
So it's basically a scarcity premium.
Exactly.
Let's call the driver's scarcity bonus.
The driver scarcity bonus. I like that it captures the concept beautifully. Let's actually go back to your wedding reception analogy.
Okay, let's do it.
Imagine the buffet just opened, but there happens to be a massive shortage of chairs near the food. The few remaining chairs close to the buffet suddenly have an immense shadow value because they are incredibly scarce.
Oh, I see.
If a guest really wants to sit there, they might have to offer a bribe to whoever owns that chair. That bribe is the driver's scarcity bonus. It's the premium commanded by the sheer rarity of the asset.
That makes so much sense. Okay, so we have the rider's fare and we have the driver's scarcity bonus. But how did these two shadow variables interact with the actual physical cost of the trip? Like, how do they connect back to the deadhead miles?
What's fascinating here is that the connection happens through a concept called complementary slackness.
Complementary slackness.
The term sounds super intimidating, I know, but it is truly the golden rule of dispatch. It is the mathematical glue that forces the business intuition to actually make sense. Complementary slackness tells us how the driver's current physical state dictates their financial value.
I was reading this section super carefully because this is really where the magic trick happens.
It is.
Let's say a driver is just sitting idle on their couch, completely unassigned. They aren't needed to fulfill the current demand. Because they are sitting idle, the math dictates that their scarcity bonus is exactly 0.
Right. They aren't rare, they aren't needed, so they earn zero premium.
But if a driver is used, if they're actively dispatched to pick up a rider, then their scarcity bonus can be greater than zero. They have proven their value to the network.
Yes.
And here's where the perfect equation forms. If a specific driver and a specific rider are matched together, complementary slackness dictates an absolute rule.
And what's the rule?
The rider's fare minus the driver's scarcity bonus will equal exactly the physical dispatch costs.
Exactly. Let's rearrange that algebra so we can really hear what it means in the real world. If we move the variables around, it means the rider's fare equals the dispatch cost plus the driver's scarcity bonus.
Wow.
The math simply discovered the economics. The platform calculates your price by adding the physical cost of the miles to whatever premium the driver's scarcity commands at that exact second.
The elegance of it is staggering when you realize this isn't just some business policy a guy made up in a boardroom. It's a mathematical inevitability.
It really is. And this leads to an even grander mathematical truth in the sources called strong duality.
Strong duality.
Yeah, strong duality guarantees that the total minimal dispatch cost across the entire city, like the absolute most physically efficient way to route everyone, is exactly equal to the sum of all riders' fares minus the sum of all drivers' bonuses.
Wait, really? So the physical efficiency of the city and the economic balancing of the city are actually the exact same equation, just viewed from two different sides.
They're inextricably linked. You literally cannot optimize the physical distance without the math automatically generating the prices.
Which brings us all the way back to the guy standing in the rain outside the concert, staring at his phone.
The million-dollar question.
Yes. We've talked about fares and scarcity bonuses, but how does the shadow math actually create the massive surge multiplier he's looking at?
Well, the surge multiplier is not some arbitrary fee made up by a marketing department to squeeze extra profit during a storm. I mean, it feels like it, but it's not.
So what is it?
It is the literal physical materialization of that shadow variable, the driver's scarcity bonus. Think about the concert scenario. It starts pouring rain, thousands of people open their app at the exact same time, and there simply aren't enough cars. The drivers suddenly become incredibly rare.
And because supply is tight, their scarcity bonus universally shoots up across the board.
The shadow variable spikes. And because we know from our perfect equation that the rider's fare must cover the physical cost plus the driver's bonus, right? When the scarcity bonus goes up, it mathematically forces the rider's price to go up with it to keep the equation perfectly balanced. The platform is passing the cost of that economic rent directly to the rider.
So the surge price you see on your screen is literally the mathematical shadow price of a supply constraint. You are just paying for the scarcity of the car.
Exactly.
The surge is just a shadow. I love that realization. But practically speaking, when I read this, my brain immediately went to the real-world logistics of it all.
Oh, the compute power.
Yeah. How can these tech companies possibly calculate this citywide matrix math every single second? You have tens of thousands of cars moving, thousands of people opening and closing the app, GPS signals bouncing off skyscrapers. The variables are changing constantly.
It's true, taking a beautiful academic theory and running it at gig economy scale presents a massive engineering hurdle. But the source material gives us a peek into the practical execution.
Okay, how do they do it?
The system doesn't actually calculate a bespoke mathematical problem for every single individual rider in real time.
Yeah.
That would absolutely fry their servers.
Right.
Instead, they run the linear program to read those shadow variables, and then they aggregate them.
Oh, the notes mention using a geographic grid system, right? They group the variables into zones.
Imagine tossing a giant honeycomb pattern over a map of the city. The system calculates the driver scarcity bonuses, averages them out within each individual hexagon of the honeycomb, smooths out any wild spikes so one street corner isn't entirely different from the next, and puts a hard cap on it so the price doesn't accidentally scale to infinity.
Computing an entire city map like that still sounds incredibly heavy, though.
It does, but it turns out that modern mathematical solvers, like this specialized software called Gurobi mentioned in the sources, can solve these massive but sparse matrix problems in mere milliseconds.
Milliseconds.
Yeah, the computing processing power isn't the bottleneck at all.
Wait, if the servers can do the math instantly, what slows it down? Why don't they just update it every millisecond?
Because the physical world is messy. People cancel requests halfway through, drivers take a wrong turn, traffic lights change. If the platform updated the surge price every single millisecond based on the raw math, the price on your screen would flicker wildly like a stock ticker.
Oh, right. It would be entirely unreadable.
So instead of updating constantly, they filter out the noise, They usually run this massive linear program every 1 to 5 minutes to set the baseline surge level for the next brief window of time.
That perfectly explains that feeling of opening the app, seeing a price, closing it to grab your coat, and opening it 2 minutes later to find the price jumped to $20.
Yes, you just crossed the threshold into the next honeycomb refresh cycle.
The grid refreshed its shadow prices while I was putting on my coat. That is wild.
It's frustrating, but it's just math.
Okay, so the primal map puzzle sets the baseline. The dual shadow gives us the surge pricing. But what happens if we tinker with the matrix?
Tinker how?
Like, what if we decide to change the fundamental rules of the game? I was thinking about the equality constraint, the absolute rule that every single rider must get a car.
Right.
What if a rider lives 30 miles out in the suburbs, and it makes absolutely zero economic sense to send a driver all the way out there? Does the math just break if the platform flat out refuses to serve them?
The beauty of this framework is its adaptability. If the platform decides a rider doesn't have to be served, that original equality constraint, the ironclad rule that everyone gets a seat at the wedding, simply shifts into an inequality constraint.
So the rule becomes up to 1 seat per person. You get a ride or you don't.
Exactly. And because the primal rule changes, the shadow it casts changes too. The rider's fare variable goes from being a free variable that can be anything to being greater than or equal to 0.
And if the platform decides to completely abandon that rider in the suburbs?
Then the complementary slackness rule kicks in again. If the rider is left stranded, the math dictates that their fare drops to exactly 0. The mathematical shadow perfectly reflects the physical reality. No service was provided, so 0 economic value was generated.
The system adapts beautifully. But reading through the edge cases really made me think about the drivers themselves. What about fairness?
Fairness is a tricky one.
Let's say one driver just happens to be parked in the absolute perfect spot downtown all day. They keep getting assigned to all the highly lucrative, high-scarcity trips, while another driver just one street over gets continually stuck taking short, low-paying fares.
Right, happens all the time.
They are putting in the same hours, but the math is drastically favoring one over the other. Can you program the algorithm to be fairer to the workforce?
You can force the algorithm to care about fairness, but doing so fundamentally breaks the clean, simple math we've been discussing. If you want to stop one driver from taking all the highly profitable fares, you have to add a fairness penalty into the main objective.
A fairness penalty.
Yeah, the sources mention using something like a variance metric or a generic coefficient, which are statistical ways to measure inequality.
But the moment you inject a measurement of inequality into the formula,
It is no longer a linear programming problem. It mathematically transforms into what's called quadratic programming, or QP.
what is the practical difference between linear and quadratic in this specific context?
Think about the shape of the data. Linear programming is about drawing straight lines between points to find the shortest distance. Quadratic programming forces the computer to optimize for curves and complex distributions.
Oh, I see.
It requires significantly more computing power to find the peak of a curve than just the end of a straight line.
So if the math gets too heavy for the servers, do they have a simpler workaround to keep things fair?
They do. They often use a secondary objective, sometimes called a lexicographic approach.
Lexicographic.
Yeah. This is basically giving the algorithm a prioritized checklist. The primary command is, first, maximize the overall value of the matches across the city. Find the absolute most efficient state.
And once it finds that perfect state,
The secondary command kicks in. Now, out of all the possible ways to achieve that maximum efficiency, pick the specific arrangement that spreads the earnings out most evenly between the drivers.
it's like telling the wedding planner, your #1 job is to get everyone as close to the buffet as possible. But if you have 2 equally good layouts, pick the one that makes sure no single table gets all the expensive desserts.
That's a perfect analogy. The wedding planner has a hierarchy of goals, and platforms can take this even further with multi-objective balancing.
How does that work?
They might want to balance the dispatch cost, driver fairness, and the rider's estimated time of arrival, all at the exact same time. To do that, the platform runs the formula using a weighted sum, basically assigning a percentage of importance to each individual goal.
And I assume when they add all these new goals, the shadows change again.
Dramatically.
Hmm.
The shadow variables we've been calling fares and bonuses adapt. They no longer just represent a simple dollar price.
What do they represent then?
They morph to represent the marginal value of each specific objective you're trying to hit. The shadow reveals exactly how much physical efficiency you are trading away to achieve, say, a tiny bit more driver fairness.
This is so wild. We've covered an incredible amount of ground today. I
Yeah.
really want to synthesize this for everyone listening. The next time you are standing in the rain, staring at your phone, and you tap that button to order a ride.
You're doing a lot more than you think.
Exactly. You need to realize you aren't just sending a ping to a server or haggling with some greedy corporate dial. You are actively inserting yourself as a variable into a massive real-time optimization matrix.
The price that pops up on your screen is the result of a perfectly balanced mathematical mechanism constantly weighing your immediate need for a ride against the citywide scarcity of the driver fleet.
Which honestly brings us to a rather unsettling final thought.
Oh.
Yeah, now that you know surge pricing isn't arbitrary, that it is, quite literally, the calculated mathematical shadow of a physical supply constraint, it forces you to look around and wonder,
Wonder what?
what other invisible shadow prices are subtly dictating your life? Think about the wildly fluctuating cost of your airline tickets, or the dynamic delivery fees on your takeout app. Or heck, even the hidden throttling of your internet bandwidth when everyone in your neighborhood starts streaming a movie at 8 p.m.
It's all optimization under the hood.
We might all just be variables in someone else's primal problem, so the next time you see a surge multiplier, just remember, you're paying for the shadow.